Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hello and welcome to this edition of The Assessment. We're here today in the beautiful Lake Placid, New York at the Initial Assessment Conference. We're here with Chris Ebright, who's one of the teachers here today. You've been teaching two lessons over the week?
Yeah, I had
Is that right?
a session on Wednesday night, which was a pediatric ALS kind of review for anybody that was interested as far as more kind of a critical care aspect of it. And then just this afternoon, we just finished up a critical care pharmacology review for a lot of the critical care track that they're trying to promote here.
Wow, yeah, so that you're more the ALS side of things, or the advanced
At least this
paramedic.
weekend, that's what they've got me doing, yeah. So I do a little bit of everything, but they wanted some specific stuff that I don't normally do, and the committee had kind of picked what they needed, and they were looking for some additional options, and I said, well, I'll do whatever you want. So they came up with this, and I made it happen, so it worked out pretty well.
Excellent. Now, can you kind of describe the pediatric class? I think it'd be interesting, just what you taught and the kind of curriculum you had there.
I mean, it was kind of one of those things where I really didn't know exactly what everybody would have liked to hear, so I kind of covered a wide variety. Because, with most pediatric patients, it's one of two things. It's either respiratory or it's cardiac. So I incorporated both of those aspects into it. So we talked initially about something that a lot of people don't hear about a lot, which is chest pain with pediatric patients. Because as adults, we all assume that chest pain is cardiac, but in this one we kind of talked about how it's not necessarily cardiovascular, that it's a lot of other things. So we gave them that, something to chew on. We did a pediatric status asthmaticus case, which is one of the things where we got more into the medications and kind of the more advanced techniques if you have a child like that, how bad they can be. And we finished it off with something I've done in other conferences where it's just my kind of own 7 personal things you need to think about as far as pediatric cardiac arrest. And kind of gave them some more of the more recent research and updates on a lot of the things that they're reading about in the various trade magazines and things like that.
Yeah. Which is certainly important to cover for adult and pediatric, but for pediatric, people tend to be a little more scared, and you don't get that as often. So
they're skittish. And the good thing is that we don't see them very often because the parents are usually carting them off to the hospital. But in the instance where you get a pediatric patient and it just kind of already got you tied up and in a bind thinking about that as a pediatric call, and then especially like up in this area, the hospital may not be very far, but because of the roads they have to travel, the travel time is minutes to hours sometimes, and you'd be with these kids for a lot longer time, and you can't necessarily just land a helicopter on top of the mountain, so they got to get them down somehow, and they got to know how to take care of them. So that's kind of what we were trying to push through that program there.
Now, Chris, you've been in EMS for how many years now?
This actually, as of July, it'll be 25 years.
Well, excellent. That's awesome. Can you kind of describe how you got into EMS?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. Long time ago, it's probably been about close to 30 years ago. My dad and I did a bike ride bicycle ride across the state of Kansas. And it was something that he wanted to always do, so I went with him. And we did the ride, and we were driving back from Kansas, and we were just about through Indiana. And my dad is a handyman with everything, and he saw a lady that was by the side of the road just banging on the hood of her car, and he thought, well, she's having car trouble, and he'd stop and go take a look. So he backed up, and as we got closer, he says to me, he says, you know CPR, right? Because I was in college at the time for athletic training, and I said, well, yeah, but she's still alive. He says, well, something's not right with her. I said, maybe you ought to go look. So I go over there, and, we're on a major interstate, and it's probably 95 degrees outside, and it's just blazing hot. And I can hear her, even with all the traffic, wheezing. So I knew something was bad. So long story short, I put her into the air conditioning in her car. She passes out and stops breathing. Just as I'm able to pull her back out of the car, Indiana State Patrol shows up, and we end up doing CPR on the side of the road. His partner shows up. We do a little bit more. The ambulance shows up, and at that point, the ambulance was doing their thing, and I had no idea of anything about EMS, and they handed me the IV bag. And I thought I was king of the world right there, and I showed my dad I was like doing one of these things. Yeah. And so after that, because I had graduated college already, and I was substitute teaching mostly elementary school kids, which isn't a far stretch from a lot of the adults I teach these days, it seems like. But so I thought, I'd always had those aptitude tests, like, what would you want to do when you grow up? And EMS was always one of those, and that, along with that, just kind of catapulted me into thinking I did it. So I took a basic class and kind of got hooked, and 25 years later, here we are.
Wow. And have you been paid or volunteer position the whole time?
Mostly paid. There are a lot of volunteer areas where I used to live in Ohio, and there's quite a few over in the Louisiana area where I'm from now. So I didn't have any interaction with them directly, but I did a lot of education for them.
Okay. And now you're currently a paramedic, but you also have a separate role. You don't ride EMS as much, but you do something else. Is that correct?
No, actually, education is my full-time job. I haven't been in the street now for full-time for probably a good 7 or 8 years. Okay. But I had taken a job where I am in Louisiana with Acadian Ambulance, which I work in one of their subsidiaries, which is called the National EMS Academy. And it's their training center for, it used to actually was built out of the need from Katrina. When all that damage occurred, and they needed more and more help because people basically just bailed on the state and just left. So they had to replenish their supply of personnel, and so they developed this academy to educate, get basics and medics out there to initially just help the company, but now we've actually expanded to outside environment and everybody else. So now we get typically in a year's time we'll probably train about 150 paramedics. Wow. And we'll do probably close to the same amount for even more so with EMTs. And we've just recently started to go online, so we're kind of progressing in that direction. Yeah. But I've been down there, like I say, for about 8 years teaching with them, and I mostly do just their paramedic education.
Wow. So, do you get a lot of opportunities to travel around conferences and stuff like that?
This year I've been really fortunate. I usually get out as much as I can, and it's somewhere between 12 and 15 times a year, but I think I'm going to get close to almost 20 this year.
Wow.
So I've been pretty busy this spring, and I can't complain because I like to travel. Yeah. And I like to come out, and I especially love coming to Lake Placid because this place is, just to come here is just fun. Yeah. And the conference is really well run, and all my friends are here, so it's kind of nice to spend the weekend. So.
That's right, yeah. Well, we're happy to have you here and have your wisdom poured into the prizes around here.
It's been fun, and it always is, and these guys do a great job.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, if someone's interested in finding out more about the company that you work with or more about you, and where could they go for that?
Well, we have our own website for our specific part of the company. It's just nationalemsacademy.com. But if they look up Acadian Ambulance or Acadian Companies, then that also would lead them to us eventually. And that's the easiest probably way to find them. But I routinely also I have my own website that I just kind of keep track of some things. It's not very big. I don't build a whole lot into it, but it's just a reference point. I keep a lot of the articles and stuff that I've actually just started writing for Limmer Education. They and I kind of contacted together, and they wanted a specific type of article where we're using case studies and then we're explaining a specific topic. Oh, yeah. So we just started doing that. I think I've just finished my 7th article for them. Okay. And next month we're going to delve into the whole opioid type of controversy that's going on out at this time, and we'll see if we can address that a little bit and get some comments and so on for there.
Absolutely. Now, if someone were to approach you and ask, why should I join EMS? Obviously, your position or how you joined EMS might be some way another person joins EMS. But what would you tell them? Or how would you encourage them if they wanted to join EMS?
If they want to join EMS, they got to have a tolerance for taking care of people. You know, and everybody has their own cliche, like I got into this because I wanted to help people, and I think inherently, if you ask anybody that, even if we don't say it directly, that's kind of why we did. And one way or another, we're here to serve the greater good, and whether it's now in my position to educate people that are out there doing it on the front lines, or if something happens where they are directly involved, you know, as a primary job. We're still, as a profession, still pretty small in timelines versus, you know, a lot of the other professions medically. So there's always room for us to grow, and we are. And it's just we keep progressing, and guys like us that are out there educating, we're just trying to make sure everybody stays up on the most current stuff, and if they can, they're given the best care, and we hope it goes out there. So.
Now, with your experience and your knowledge in EMS, if you could go back to when you were an EMT after like maybe 1 year in the service, what's one piece of advice you would tell yourself if you could?
Sleep when you can.
Sleep when you can. Yeah.
Because inevitably, if you think that you can, you need to, because somehow the EMS gods are going to know when you're too tired, and they're going to be calling. So it's always good to get your rest when you can, and take care of yourself in general when you're not working. Yeah. There's a lot of people that dedicate themselves to this profession, which is great, but sometimes you just need a break, and you need to have that vacation. You need to have that weekend away, or go fishing, or whatever it is you do, to keep the balance. Because if not, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of problems with people that are just they can't keep that balance, and you know, sometimes they end up doing something rash, and it's terrible what happens. But we try to watch out for each other as best we can, but sometimes it's just you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need that rest, you can always come up to the IAC conference here in the beautiful Lake Placid. It's a wonderful weekend and definitely restful up here. You can get to learn some amazing things. So. Well, Chris, thank you for your time today. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. If you get a chance to come up here, take a weekend to rest, please come to the Initial Assessment Conference. It's a wonderful time. And you might just get to hear Chris talk next year. As always, have a great day. As always, be sure to check out some more on the links below. We'll post, and you can check those out. We're gonna cut and do a different outro. I'm like derail.
Yeah. Did the motorcycle start you off a little bit there?
No.
No, just your own brain.
Yes.